Okay, that's great. Okay, so thanks a lot for this invitation. Today I'm going to talk to you about uh, sustainable food systems. How do we prioritize people, poultry, and the planet? And I think that to start with this topic, I think that it's essential to see that we now have an absolute global convergence on the need for more sustainable food systems. From the IPCC Climate Change and Land Report, which was ratified by all governments in plenary at the end of last year, all the way to the Eat Lancet Commission, the state of food security in the world, and a range of other reports. I mentioned the Climate Change and Land report because it's the first time that that all governments ratify that it is extremely important to deal with food, both from the supply and the demand, and that has been ratified in public. Now, where does poultry sit in all of this conundrum? Well, let's talk a little bit about the future of poultry and also what's been happening in the last 25 years or so. So the demand for poultry has been increasing at an accelerated pace. What you see here in this graph, which is a traffic light graph, is in green, it would be increases in the percentage of consumption per capita for different kinds of animal source foods. And what you see is, for example, if you compare bovine meat or mutton, you see that in many places it's stagnating or it's relatively increasing in just a few places. But what you see for poultry meat at the end, the last column, you basically see everything in green. If you go to the last column, you see the world, 106% increase in per capita consumption in the last 25 years, with some countries exhibiting enormous rates of growth. For example, you see China, when you compound that by population densities, enormous. You see Central Asia, Southeastern Asia, with so many people, more than 300%. India, 500%. So we know this is actually growing at a very accelerated rate. Now, the key is, how do we ensure that we match some sustainability standards to meet this growth? We know that the environmental performance of poultry holds its own in terms of animal source food. It's quite good. And what you see here, this is from relatively recent data from Poor and Nemetschek, where you see basically the three major production stages of different animal source foods. At some of the last columns here, hopefully you see my cursor, you can see poultry meat and eggs. And in reality, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions per se, from the production processes, what we see is that, well, these are by far the lowest of the animal source food. Compare poultry or eggs to, say, beef, and you will see that, well, we're talking about here orders of magnitude. When we look at what's needed for producing crops, for producing feed for animals, at least it's comparable to many of the other animal source foods. In many cases, because poultry will consume grains in large quantities, and we're producing a lot, well, we see here that it's a significant amount of emissions from crop production and feed transport, but in many cases much better than the pig sector, comparable to the dairy sector, and so on. In terms of land use change, we see here an important, it's one of the biggest changes in terms of cropland, simply because the demand for poultry is growing a lot. So we need to produce the feed for those, but obviously nothing in comparison to the land use change for beef production, for example. It's here a factor of 8 or something like that. So that's not bad at all. It's much better than other sources, but of course, the mode of production matters tremendously. There are very significant welfare issues, especially in intensive systems. In extensive systems, you also get them associated with, higher disease burdens and so on. Then there are aspects also related to large animal densities and in terms of poultry diseases, global pandemic risks, the potential for avian influenza to spread relatively quickly. We have issues around pollution. In many places, still the industry is not well regulated, so the pollution through excreta of soil, water, and water is very significant. Reduce their quality and a range of others, and obviously antimicrobial resistance, which is an important issue. So we need to deal with this. So how we grow poultry in the future matters a lot. How we match this demand. Now, in terms of a healthy diet, this is from the Eat Lancet, and as I call, eggs are these little nutrient bombs that are fantastic for kids and for me as well, because I love eggs, and hopefully for all of you as well. Certainly, there's others that would need these eggs and poultry meat much more, especially those people in low and middle income countries. There's a need for significant increases in consumption, and what we see even in some conceptions of healthy diets from sustainable food systems. This is a graph from the Eat Lancet report. If you look at poultry, these low and middle income countries will still require a very significant increase in the consumption of poultry meat for reaching a healthy status of the population. In other places, we're probably over consuming, but I'll just focus on the key message of basically sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, the Pacific, and South Asia requiring significant consumption. Obviously, one of the things that comes to mind is the competition for land use. And this is something that we really need to take into consideration. We have a significant demand for poultry. It's mostly commercial poultry, but we need to see up to what level of intensification we take this production to ensure that we meet welfare standards and others. The demand for cereal grains will certainly increase, and this is also associated with cropland. But what can we do? How a lot of people say, well, aren't we competing directly with food for people? Yes, in some cases, yes, but there's important opportunities. What about circularity? What about using, for example, some of the food waste streams to feed poultry in the future? How about adequate land use planning, where we are growing feed for poultry in low opportunity coastlands? These things need to be properly weighted as we move into the future. I certainly think that this is an area. It's one of the best animal sources of protein and micronutrients, and it will be essential for the poor as we move along into sustainable food systems. Thank you very much.